it's like, how can we optimize our testosterone? We can actually optimize the environment we use it in. I'm driven, I want to go places, but I'm making sure I'm giving myself the best opportunity possible when I'm in that state to move forwards. And I think that's a really important point.
I like listening to podcasts where I can gain some information from it, but I can also take something away that I can go, right, do you know what? I'm going to go and crack on with that in my life. I'm going to go and use it and make a shift. So as ever, some practical things to do as well.
Welcome to the Awaken Man podcast. You join me, Mr. Benjamin Owen.
And Mr. Pete Taylor. Caught me off guard there.
Sorry, bro. Welcome to the How to Increase Your Testosterone podcast. And honestly, I've listened to so many of these, and we're going to take a different spin on it. We're going to take the Awaken Man spin on how to increase your testosterone today.
Interesting one. This would be a good one. We've not actually talked around subjects like this.
Even though we both come from this background,
Yeah.
talking like about this sort of stuff all the time.
Yeah, going to be good. I'm excited.
Yeah, and I think why do you need to increase your testosterone as a man? Well let's like kind of list out before we get into the actual questions and the actual discussion. So fundamentally, from a health perspective, your testosterone levels are one of the best reflections of your current health. So it's not just your penis that needs testosterone to get hard and get rigid. Your heart needs it as well. So every single contraction of the heart where it gets rigid and relaxes is testosterone driven, right? So it's the hormone that creates stiffness and relaxation in the body. It's incredible. And I worked with a naturopathic doctor for years, and he would educate me about, if you want to ask a man about his current heart health, he just say, do you wake up with an erection in the morning?
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and I remember holy shit, and I remember the times that I'd be most stressed, and I was like, yeah, my morning wood is not where it should be, right?
It's not strong.
Yeah, it wasn't. And being totally honest, because I was super stressed, and we're going to go into it in this podcast. And when you speak to a lot of gym goers about testosterone, they think it's about TRT, it's about creams, it's about, guys shirtless, lifting weights, shouting raw. It isn't. And the things that we're going to...
And steroids, right?
Steroids, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm of the belief, when you get a man to optimize his testosterone levels, what starts to happen is that he has this real go seek, go get feeling about him. And I wanted to call this podcast the Potency Podcast, but Pete said, Ben, nobody really knows what potency means. And I was like, okay, how can we actually make sure we talk to you guys and you ladies who are listening? And he's like, the Testosterone Podcast.
And it sounds like it just sounds like a wanky word, potency. It just sounds wanky. Let's just use some, I was going to say 5-year-old language, but maybe a 5-year-old's probably not saying test, but you guys know what it is. I know what it is.
Yeah.
And if I know what it is, you guys will know what it is.
Yeah, briefly speaking about potency, though, what it means is the ability to push through, to break through. And when a man is potent in his life, he has potent energy levels, he has potent sex levels, sex drive, he has potent ability to have hard conversations, as we've covered in previous podcasts. His testosterone is high, he feels good, and he is an owner in his life. So this is why you absolutely need to really pay attention to what we share today, because there's nuances and bits we'll share that will really resonate with you. So some of you guys might be gym goers who know a lot about testosterone from an endocrine perspective, whereas some of you guys may have never even heard of what really creates testosterone. So we're going to go into the science, we're going to go to the practicalities and how to look after your testosterone, and we're going to go into some of the symptoms that you can use to work out, actually, do I need to go and get my testosterone checked? Do I need to optimize it? Sometimes it's worth just having this awareness, because you'll perform better in your business, you'll have higher sex drive, and much more appropriate levels of growth from your gym and stuff like that, and you'll lower body fat levels, longevity, all that stuff. So let's dive straight in, Pete, because I think it's really important to kind of just let's get into the
And as ever, it'll be practical. I like listening to podcasts where I can gain some information from it, but I can also take something away that I can go, right, do you know what? I'm going to go and crack on with that in my life. I'm going to go and use it and make a shift. So as ever, some practical things to do as well.
Dive straight in on the first one, right? Porn.
Let's do it. Oh, porn.
Now, if you would have told me in my 20s that porn is going to detract from my potency, from my testosterone levels, from my sex drive, I would have disagreed with you.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, and like, I'm not really like 100% clued up on the mechanism. I would actually really like to get a real expert on this. But what porn does is it sets an unrealistic expectation of sex. And what I've noticed is that for me as a man, since I've given up porn and it's no longer a crux for relationship issues that I have to sort out the relationship problems I have with Poppy. Like, if there's an issue with Poppy in our sex life or intimacy, I would be able to leave it way longer whilst I was surrogating intimacy for fantasy. You know,
Mm.
that was a statement you seen used last year. Last year, he said, what a lot of men do is they surrogate intimacy for fantasy. And I was like, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, oh shit, that was it. That was the session where I was like, right, porn's got to go.
Yeah, that's a good. So it's like if we're not getting our fantasies and desires in our current relationship, we'll just go and seek it through porn, right? And then because we've done that, so we watched a bit of porn, we've got our hit, right? We then don't go and rectify that in our relationship, or we just ignore that in our relationships.
Yeah, and then the downstream of that is where the problem with testosterone exists, is that there's this deep, annoying problem that ekes away at our virility, so our zest for life. If you think about this, if I've got a problem in my relationship that I'm not solving, it's going to be stressful in the long term. And as we get through these points, you'll realize how holding on to anger problems is what actually, in the long term, lowers testosterone. And that's how I've made sense of this, because I've seen this so many times when real experts are talking about the effects of porn on testosterone. And I was like, at first glance, I was like, this doesn't really make sense. I don't really kind of get this, but it might not make sense at biological kind of front points. Like, okay, when I watch porn, I get horny, and then that increases. That feels like an increase in my testosterone, but it's the problems that creates in my life which actually lower it over time. So that's the first one. So if you want to increase your testosterone levels, sort out the problems in your relationship. It's quite a confrontational point. And if you listen to this, you might be thinking, oh wow, I never really thought about it like that. And again, surrogating intimacy for fantasy. So, like Pete said, where am I when I have a desire in my need for sex? Where am I meeting that with porn instead of getting really vulnerable with my partner?
Yeah. So just talking from my own experience here with porn, I don't even know what age I started watching it at. Like as soon as I had solid like dial-up connection, internet connection. I remember, right? Oh God, are we gonna go? We're
Yeah,
gonna.
going there.
Maybe we should do a whole episode on porn, right?
We
But
should.
I remember. Do you remember Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, how old was I? Maybe like 14, 15. I remember trawling the internet, right? And then the internet it was a dial-up connection, right? So it was real slow, really, really slow. Just trawling the internet, trying to find her naked.
Yeah.
Right? Just trying to find her naked. And at the time, my parents were together. Right, and we lived in a big house, good sized house, right? And we had there was like 3 bathrooms in the house, and one of the main bathroom, the carpet, I could pull the carpet up, right? And I'd found a load of porn mags in the woods, and I picked out my favorite ones. I'm young. I am. Yeah, actually, my parents split up when I was like 13. So I'm 30. So I'm 13, right? And I'm hiding the sheets underneath the carpet in the bathroom,
That's
right? But so, and this is probably for a lot of guys, like when we're that old, when we're like 13, 14, 15, we start to see it. And especially in today's world, because it's so easy and so accessible. Like it wasn't like me back in the day waiting 30 minutes for my internet connection to dial in and then like 10 minutes for a page to load up. Right. Now it's so accessible, it's so quick. But no one teaches you or no one talks to you about like the bad things about porn at that age, right? It's like, that looks good. This feels good. I will just continue this, which you do into all through your teens, all through your 20s, into your 30s. And before you know it, you've been watching porn and so on for 20 years.
yeah.
Right. And so it just becomes habitual and it is just normal.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my, that's hilarious. I think you've just spoken to probably most, like 90% of our audience have probably got a similar experience.
Hiding porn underneath the bathroom carpet.
Yeah. But that's the thing. Can we bring it back to like testosterone and relationships? And a big part of speaking about testosterone is speaking about sex. And And this is most men's relationship with sex. It's quite shameful. There's lots of unmet desires and expectations. And so when you get rid of the band-aid, it forces you to confront these. Like one of the men in the Awaken Man group, he shared openly how he stopped watching porn, and now him and his wife are starting to really go into like what's called discovering this stuff, like really learn about each other's desires, and that's really, really powerful. So the second one is that distraction. Okay, so first one, so increase testosterone, change relationship with porn. The second one is distraction. So when a man is driven, he has high testosterone, which is the go seek hormone, go and create, that's what testosterone does. Go and seek a mate. When you've got high testosterone, you're like, yeah, I need to go and seek a mate. I need to go and seek security and do in my life. The fastest way to get rid of that power is to fracture his attention to tiny little pieces. And this is going to have a really, really big impact. So you can be the most driven man in the world, but if you're not looking after your attention, you're going to be stationary. And I don't know if you've ever felt like this, guys. You're like a car with your foot on the accelerator, but you're spinning your wheels. Now, although this might not correlate directly with testosterone, but it's like, how can we optimize our testosterone? We can actually optimize the environment we use it in. I'm driven. I want to go places, but I'm making sure I'm giving myself the best opportunity possible when I'm in that state to move forwards. And I think that's a really important point, because I know so many guys who even done testosterone replacement therapy. They take the gym, and they're on the gear, they take testosterone. Yeah, they ain't moving anywhere in their lives. They're stuck in a gym just looking at themselves getting big, and they've never moved anywhere because they've got high testosterone, but they're not using it. They haven't given themselves an environment or a platform. That makes sense, Pete?
It does make sense. When you were talking about it, I was thinking about whether procrastination is an indicator of low test.
Yeah, I think it could be, because it's fear. It's fear driven. It's like I'm constantly in a place of fear. And if I'm in a place of fear, I'm going to be predominantly cortisol driven. I'm driven by fight or flight mechanisms. So there probably is some correlation or causative factors. But I think the more thing is that, yeah, and we'll do a podcast on this. One of the many masks of fear is the procrastinator mask. And honestly can say is that when I've felt really ambitious, I think the word here I'm looking for is ambition. Like testosterone correlates with ambition. And when I'm feeling ambitious, I want to be able to go and use that ambition for something that's going to drive me forwards in my life.
Okay, so, and to be ambitious, it's pretty key to have a vision, have goals, have something that have our North Star, have something that we're gunning towards. We're gunning towards growth.
Yeah, and that's exactly that. And that's where distraction starts to set in. If we haven't got that, we start firing off in all different directions. Third one, lack of boundaries. Now, this is going directly going to correlate with your testosterone levels. Is that I can just share a time in my life. So when I got divorced, or I broke up from my marriage, I didn't know how to cope with that at the time. I was like, this hurts. I'm hurting a lot. And the only way I knew how to cope with that was to work from 5 in the morning till 9 at night, to just be busy, to busy myself over it. And so I just, for like maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, just worked and worked and worked and worked. I wasn't effective. The business changed, but I wasn't as effective as I could be. And I was getting ill all the time. Yeah, so like that's one of the symptoms of low testosterone. You're getting ill all the time. I was doing CrossFit, and I was training really hard, like hurting myself hard, like really pushing myself, and wasn't getting that much stronger, wasn't getting that much better. And I was like, it must be my training style. It must be where time I'm training. I probably wasn't eating enough at the time as well. And what was going on is that it was just a sheer lack of boundaries for recovery. So I was trying to work way too long, but there was a lack of intentional work that actually moved the needle. And so what happens is, like, say, for example, I think it was I can't remember who I was listening to, is like, when, especially with CrossFit as a modality for strength training and fitness, is that there's an optimum time where you can push yourself really that hard before it starts to decrease your testosterone. So you actually leave the gym with more, like, so much recovery to do, you can never actually get to the point where you're moving forwards. You
Yeah,
can't.
like overtraining.
Overtraining, yeah, like overtraining, like since having the aura, I really started to see that. And so that's what happened. I was like literally broken. I bought myself an aura ring. I told everyone, I was like, hey, I've got really, really good sleep. And I said this the other day on the way command. I was like, oh yeah, I used to pride myself on my good sleep, but I'd hit the pillow and fall straight asleep. I wasn't a good sleeper. I was freaking exhausted. My testosterone was probably in the basement. I can definitely say my sex drive was in the basement. So that for me is an indicator. Didn't get it tested. No, that's put my hand up there. I didn't get it tested. But what I can definitely say was that when I started to put healthy boundaries around when I started work and stopped work, I felt different as a man. I felt really, go back to what, my potency has gone up. I'm more effective with the things that I do. I'm more effective in my training. I'm more effective with my work. I'm more effective as a man. And that comes from boundaries. It's saying, this is where I start, this is where I stop, and this is why.
Yeah, and on to boundaries. And this is why it's really important that the people that are really close to you, aka your partner and your children and so on, are also clear about your boundaries as well. So like just onto recovery, I can speak to this because this literally happened last week more than once, and it affected my sleep. And in doing so then affected my recovery, and then in doing so then affected my test, right? What we're talking about here. So 2 nights last week, Denise washed her hair really late. Right, so has a full hair routine and in the shower for a long time, and by the time she's finished, it's nearly 9 o'clock. Now I go to bed at 9 o'clock, and typically Denise comes to bed at the same time. But on these 2 nights, she was using the hairdryer at 9 o'clock, right? And whereas I'm going to bed, and she didn't really understand why I was a little bit frustrated. And I put this boundary in before. I'm like, how important this is. That I have to be in bed by 9, asleep. And 2 nights last week, my sleep was crap because actually I was lying in bed, with the hairdryer going off and feeling frustrated. Right. So there's all these thoughts going through my head. But it's taken me, 30, 40 minutes to get to sleep rather than 10 minutes, which I normally fall asleep in 7 to 10 minutes. Pretty quick. It's taken me a lot longer, and then that has then affected my sleep throughout the whole night. I've been tossing and turning and yada yada yada, rather than just having a lovely night's sleep. So that there is a type of boundary, and it's like being able to set that boundary that my recovery is really really important, and setting that with your loved ones, like I need to do. I really need to enforce that again, because I said it before and it's been broken.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that's going on there, actually. Let me share with you, actually. There's a couple of things why that's going to affect your testosterone, right? First and foremost, sleep is your biggest natural friend for testosterone, yeah? The first wave of testosterone and growth hormone becomes actually between 10 and 12 if you go to bed at 9. So all of your growth and repair hormones, the biggest surge for them is for most people, for between 10 and 12. That's why, and I've never really I've seen this quite a lot. When you're physically exhausted, you tend to get up to go to the loo between 10 and 12, this first cycle of the night. Yeah. So then what happens is all of the growth and repair hormones happen. There's a lot of liver detoxification going on. And it's constantly doing its work then but that generally I've seen that correlate with people being physically fatigued. Yeah. The second thing is that the hairdryer is going off in the room and it's hot. So it's raising the temperature of the room. Now, if you've studied sleep, one of the things is optimal temperatures for sleep, and getting your room temperature right is really important. There's a third thing. Pete's having a cortisol spike before he goes to sleep, so that he's getting angry or stressed, pissed off. And the way that this happens, it spikes his, fight, flight, freeze response hormone. And that takes between sometimes even 1 to 2 hours to fully come back down. So what we often say is that people go, oh yeah, I get a second wind around 10 o'clock. It's normally because your body's going, what the hell are you doing? Here's a bit of stress hormone to deal with the struggles, the stresses and everything that's going on. And so what's happening is you're missing that first wave of where you're going to get your biggest flush of growth and repair hormones, testosterone, for his muscles, for his organs, all that sort of stuff, right? So this is why nights are so bad for people. This is, I remember the same doctor I worked with, he said, what do you recommend for people who do nights? And tongue-in-cheek said, get a new career. If you're missing that wave, you're going to miss that growth and repair. The second cycle in the night, when it's between 3 and 6, is where you get your repair going on. So that's where people who've got emotional pain, psychological struggle in their day, that's where they tend to get up to go to the loo. Now, I've said this to so many people, and I've heard it. I think it's from Chinese medicine. I can't remember its actual origin. It correlates so much. And so that for me was one of the symptoms. I'm either taxing myself too much physically or psychologically. The final part of this is that the hormone that is going to rise during the evening is melatonin. Yeah, and then when that rises, that sends you to sleep. If you're getting stressed before bed, you're not going to get in the right state hormonally for sleep. And this is why it's so important to do things like dim the lights, get rid of all the, like, not read your emails before you go to bed, because you don't want those stress spikes. And that's what's happening. Is you see, even to see the little notification sign causes a minor little spike in stress. It's like, oh, I've got to respond to that. I've got to respond to that. So think about that. Pete's giving you a really, really good example there. What a seemingly inconsequential event can have a big knock on things like testosterone.
Yeah, yeah. The cortisol one that you mentioned there, like my levels, absolutely, I can feel them raising, right? And that's definitely then having a huge effect on my sleep, massive effect.
Yeah, the actual remedy for that is box breathing. So if you do actually go through you can feel rising cortisol levels. I feel pissed off and feel like I'm wiring myself into my thoughts. It's that 4-4-4-4 method. 4 seconds in through the nose, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out through the mouth, 4 seconds hold, and try and be really present with the feeling of the air through rushing through the nostril and out through the lips. Like that is actually really, really helpful if you are, because it's used by the military, it's used by yogis, it's very, very well, but it's well used for moderating stress. So lack of boundaries, stress, lack of sleep, going to erode your testosterone. That's one of the easiest ways to fix your testosterone levels. Next one is lack of expression of anger. How is this going to impact your testosterone levels? What's happened is, this is a personal one. I think this is what I've noticed, is that when I don't express my emotions, they get caught up inside me. They become more powerful. They become stuck. They proliferate. And what, from let's go with the science, is that when I'm continually angry all the time, that's not good. Anger as an acute response to something, like, no, I'm not putting up with that hairdryer in the room at 10 o'clock at night. That's okay. When I'm an angry man all the way through my day, borderline raging, that's not good. So it's the difference between acute versus chronic. Now, from a hormonal perspective, what that means is that I'm constantly battling for something called pregnenolone to go either one pathway or another. So there's this pool of hormones called pregnenolone. It's almost like, imagine a pool literally in your body. There's loads of them, right? And it's where all the building blocks for either growth hormones come from or stress hormones come from. And your body has to prioritize. And it will always prioritize survival over thrive. If I'm angry all the way through the day, my body's going to constantly pull from that pool to create my stress hormones. And it won't be as abundant in terms of making my growth hormones. So what's happening is, if I'm constantly having these contractive feelings around anger, it could be aggression, it could be humiliation, it could be shame. If I'm constantly in this contractive state, I'm not in a growth state, I'm in a contracted state. And so my testosterone is going to get hit. So even from manage your emotions, having a healthy emotional cascade every single day will massively shift how you show up and feel as a man. It's like, I remember, we were talking about this, Pete, and when you were going through the changes in your business, you're like, I've been training, I'm eating well, but I've lost muscle, because you were going through those contractive emotions.
Yeah, I remember it very, very well. Lost all my hard-earned muscle. Where the fuck's it gone? Freaking angry. That's what was going on.
Yeah, and it's like, it's not just that you were angry once or once in a day. There was a lot of anger that you were experiencing, and I think that's where it's emotional health that we don't talk about in the testosterone optimization. People talk about the vials of testosterone, getting it in the gym, me eating right, which we'll talk about in a second. But men's emotional health sits with them all day. It influences you all day long, whereas a meal influences you, great amount of the day. Training influences you, in a shorter amount in the day. So sometimes it's worth saying to yourself, well, actually, what is the biggest effect on my low testosterone? Is it my emotions? And I had my bets that it was. You're actually experiencing a lot of contractive emotions in the day, or you're experiencing powerful emotions like anger, but it's lasting all day, and that's not helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. On the emotions bit, for a lot of us guys, myself included, for many a year, just wouldn't fucking talk about it. Just like ignore that, suppress that. Emotions? No. No, I'll just hit the gym. Yeah, or whatever, just ignore that and go and do something alpha.
Yeah, even like if you look at anger as an emotion, it's a real powerful like emotion that pushes you through things. No, or like I'm angry about the way I'm showing up. I'm gonna use all this anger and go and get off the couch. That's a powerful way to operate, and it's probably go back to that word that you didn't like, it's potent. So I'm going to use it to break through this level of performance I'm going through. You can't use it if it's constantly on. We talk about willpower. Willpower is actually effective in short bursts. Sometimes you need it, but using it constantly to try and control your behaviors, it doesn't work. So it's the same. So that's where you lose your potency. You lose your ability because it's on all the time. You're constantly angry, constantly reactive. So when you really start to shift that by sharing your emotions and disarming them, as Dax Moy said in the podcast we did on anger, use them as a tool, not a weapon, you start to see your life really shift. And I think that's a really, really important point. The next one is health. Just really, I'm going to fly through this one because I think it's one that is important for men to really get right. It's just your eating, moving, and sleeping. Eating right, eating protein, carbohydrates, and vegetables and fruits.
Plants, yeah.
Plants, yeah. Optimizing your diet. I think we could go a mile deep on this in another podcast. And not drinking beer all the time. But beer is full of like estrogenic nutrients. So what we want to do is like I think that if I want to make my estrogen go up, drink beer. If I want to, if I want to make my testosterone go up, don't drink beer. I think it's optimizing that. So many guys drink a shed load of alcohol every single week, and it blunts their testosterone. So the antichrist of testosterone, one of them is alcohol.
Yeah, I mean, the one line and the simple thing on the diet is scrap all process, reduce all your sugar, and just eat things that are natural: plants, animals, fish.
Yeah,
It's like the two sentences that there's your 80-20 on diet.
yeah, and there's so many, we could go a mile deep. There's so many different opinions, but I think we could do a whole podcast on that. And I think it's just optimize your diet. Moving is low level cardio is actually really good for testosterone levels. It reduces stress. So things like 180 minus your age is what's called your MAF heart rate, your MAF heart rate. When I did MAF heart rate training, the Maffetone method, my stress levels dropped down. It's really, really low level cardio, and it's actually a really great, you feel great. So what happens is about 20 minutes in, you start sweating. So you're actually sweating, which is getting rid of, it's really, really good for detoxification. It's good for how you feel, but then you don't leave the gym overtaxed. And I would definitely recommend programming that into your actual training as well. So
Yeah.
going for walks up, steady hills, not a massive mountain climb.
The 80-20 on this one, to double up on that, to make it even more potent, right,
Yeah,
is to go for a walk outside, like a strenuous walk, like, go for a walk in the woods. So then you're getting natural daylight, you're outside in nature, and a bit of exercise.
just don't lose your dog.
Just don't lose your dog like I did 2 weeks ago. Oh, horrible.
Yeah. And then the final one is self-restraint. I think one of the things that I've noticed is with self-restraint, it's the ability to keep your promises to yourself. And we're going to do a podcast on the tools. And I've gone really a mile deep into the tools, which are psychological tools that we use to help ourselves fight our inner demons, move forward with our lives. And what I've noticed is as I've increased in my ability to not act on impulses, I felt like, actually, I had a lady on the weekend that said to me, Ben, you've got real potency. And I was like, it's just like, you've got a real confidence about you. And I was like, that's really interesting. I've been really working on not acting on my impulses, and my relationships changed because of that. My better in my business, I'm a better coach. I trust myself more, and that's coming through in the way I'm showing up in the world. And so that all comes from
Nice. I like
self-restraint.
that. Yeah, you could double that up with the porn one, right? So I'm going to quit porn, right? I've quit porn this year, right? But it's then having the self-restraint to not go back to it. To, like, if that urge comes up, so get horny. Oh, I'm horny, right? And there's that urge to just go and do what you always used to do, and go and watch a bit of porn. It's that self-restraint then to not go and do that. So there's a bit of a double whammy there.
Yeah, I'll acknowledge like just sharing that, Pete, as well, because I think so many guys will struggle with that. And what really worked for me with this was when I have the thought I need to go and watch porn, I detach from that thought. I'll tell myself I'm okay to have that thought. It's just a thought. I don't need to make it a reality. It doesn't need to be a truth. I don't need to take it seriously. I've got all these different methods. So I could literally have that thought. I need to go watch porn for 5-10 minutes and just hold it outside of myself and just keep going with whatever I'm doing. And that has been, for me, the most empowering way to deal with impulses. There is other ones, like there is actually the tool, which is called the Black Sun. I'm going to do a podcast on the tools. And in the supermarket, when I'm going down the beer aisle, because I like a Friday beer, and I decided to give up alcohol. And I was like, oh, do you know what? Let's get 4 Coronas. Beans of mine. On a Friday, I have a really ice cold Corona. And I just wanted to not have it for a couple of months. Like, just going to switch off alcohol for a bit. And every time I go down the beer aisle, I just need to practice this idea of I don't need to have an impulse to go and pick it up. So there's actually places in my life where I have to really practice getting a grip on my impulses, whether that's the second pint, whether that's saying yes to things that aren't going to benefit the business, whether that's biting up something Poppy says, they're impulses. So, is it directly linked to testosterone? Probably so in some way or another, but at the same time, tenuous link. That I think that this is really, in terms of potency, like you might not link directly to managing your testosterone, but am I more potent? Hell yeah. I'm really effective because I'm doing the things that I said I'm going to do, but I'm not doing the shit that not often sends me spiraling backwards. So
Yeah, do you know what? I had one this morning. So I was dropping off Leo to nursery, and I come round a corner, and I don't actually quite know if I was on the other side of the road or not. I don't think I was. But anyway, this van beeped me. Held down his beep, held down his horn and beeped me. Infuriated me, obviously. I was like, and there would have been a time where I would have hung on to that anger and being infuriated for 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes, whilst I'm still in the car, coming up with some scenario and da 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 da. But I very quickly was like, oh, wanker, why'd he beat me? Right. Do you know what? Get him out your head, Pete, because you had a good train of thought before that. And then that was that. Whereas there would have been a time where that was a self-restraint for me. There'd have been a time where I'd have gone into 10 minutes of scenarios of, us having an argument and so on and so on. So yeah, little example popped up this morning.
Yeah, that is a prime example. And like we get those all the way through our day. And this here is like lack of self-restraint leads to low confidence. So for me, it was just realizing that I was like, right, okay. So if I want true confidence, I need to practice self-restraint moment to moment. And actually, we talked about this on another podcast. A moment is 3 seconds long. So moment to moment, like Pete dropped that within 3 to 5 seconds, and he was into the next
quick. Yeah, super quick.
Yeah, so it's really important. So I think as we've gone through this podcast, we've walked through how to optimize your testosterone. There's things in here, if you listen to them, especially on the nutritional perspective, the lifestyle perspective, get out in the sun, go for walks, lower your stress, get optimal sleep, have boundaries. That will help you with your testosterone levels. You will see and feel differently when you do that. And then equally, we've walked through this idea of potency. Now, I do believe that, when we do the Awakened Man, we are going to be talking about these two things because there's that attraction. Most people know about testosterone, but there's this desire that we didn't know we needed for potency. It's like, I really need to be able to break through the barriers in my life. So, and it is testosterone you need to optimize to do that. But equally, you've got to recognize why you also need testosterone, which is to have that ability to push through the things that are currently holding you back. So hopefully this is going to be really beneficial. Now, if you've listened to the podcast, it's really, really helpful. Feel free to get in touch with us. Honestly, come over into the group, which is called the Awaken Man Project Facebook group, where we have these conversations. And equally, if this has been beneficial in any way and you feel there's one man who you could share this with, send it to him. Because honestly, this conversation, I don't believe, and we've talked about this a few times, Pete, people aren't having this conversation. They're just saying from a nutritional health perspective, but I think there's way more to it than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, we're on YouTube now. So if you want to watch this, because this is recorded on video, it'll be loaded up on YouTube in the next week or so. But there's a load of episodes already on there. So YouTube at The Awakened Man. We're there.
You guys, see you next week.
See you next week.